Good afternoon. This is Targeted Support and Intervention under ESSA. Today in this webinar, my name is Max Lang. I work for the Utah State Board of Education. I work in federal programs or ESSA programs and related state initiatives. And my colleague?
I'm Leslie Evans and also work in state school turnaround and federal school improvement.
So thank you. So to get started, I want to provide a little bit of context. Last month or at the end of January, Leslie and I called LEAs to notify LEAs that they had schools designated in state school turnaround, or we called and notified LEAs that they had schools designated under comprehensive support and intervention for Title I achievement, comprehensive support and intervention for graduation rate, and a letter just went out just under a month ago to all state superintendents and charter school directors with a link and an explanation for targeted support and intervention. All of those things we're going to talk about and review today. Just to provide a little bit of context, under the old bill, the ESSA Act, Utah identified low-performing Title I schools. And you may recall there were two designations of those schools. It was priority schools and focus schools. Thank you. At the same time, Utah also operated an initiative under the state. It's called School Turnaround and Leadership Development Act, which identified low-performing state schools. So at times, there were schools that were double identified, and in cases that caused some confusion and some complications in moving forward as to which one of the bills the school was supposed to follow. Upon the passing of the new Education Act, Every Student Succeeds Act, Utah was required to apply for those funds and prepare a plan to have approved by the Department of Education, the consolidated plan, in which we explained how we were going to administer and manage the required designation categories under the federal ESSA Act. The board's desire was to avoid complications, as there was in the past, of schools being double identified, to put the charge on data and statistics to develop one accountability system for all schools, which they have done. The charge was also given to our department to create a system, a process, forms, and tools that any school identified either in state school turnaround or federal school improvement would follow, so it wouldn't make any difference. So this slide you're looking at here kind of defines each of these categories of schools, which we'll walk through here today. State school turnaround and ESSA school improvement. And the designation categories of improvement under ESSA are Title I CSI for achievement, CSI for graduation rate, and then this last category, targeted support and improvement.
Jerry.
Okay, state turnaround. So I'm going to talk about state turnaround. In each of these categories, I'm going to define how the schools are designated, how they're identified, which resources will fund the activities under the bill, what are the requirements or actions required under each of these categories, how the school exits, and then what happens to a school that fails to exit this particular status. So for state school turnaround, the designation is of all schools, this is the lowest performing 3% of schools statewide for 2 consecutive years. These come from the legislature. The legislature has set aside funds for this, annual funds for this. The designation happens every year. The requirements under state school turnaround is that the USBE contracts with a third-party provider to conduct a needs assessment and root cause analysis in those schools. The USBE will approve a vetted list of providers, third-party providers, turnaround expert providers as the bill designates them, the LEA will conduct an RFP process, select and contract with one of those turnaround expert providers. In consultation with a school turnaround committee, they'll develop a plan based on the root cause analysis. They'll implement that plan. To exit this category of designation, the school must be above the bottom 3% for the second and 3 years of designation under this particular category. So it's a 3-year identification. A school that does not exit goes before the state board to make a decision on what actions the school must go through moving forward. So for ESSA, so that is state school turnaround. For categories of school improvement under ESSA, federal designation, you'll see that there are, in this flow chart, 2 categories. One is called Comprehensive Support and Improvement, or CSI. There are 2 categories there, the lowest performing Title I schools, and any high school with a equal to or less than, lower than a 67% graduation rate. And the other one, which Leslie will talk about here in a bit, are Targeted Support and Improvement, or TSI. And this is an identification for consistently underperforming student groups. So Comprehensive Support and Improvement, or Title I achievement, the designation is a Utah Title I school in the lowest performing 5% on the state accountability system for 3 years on average. These resources are set aside. There are funds taken off the top of the state allocation of Title I. It's 7%. These are ESSA 1003 funds used specifically for schools identified for CSI. The required actions under this for LEAs or SEAs, a notification letter must go out to parents. The USBE will contract with a third-party provider to conduct a comprehensive needs assessment and root cause analysis. The LEA will take the results of that root cause. They can either contract with a third-party provider or utilize the expertise and experience in their own LEA and school to develop a school improvement plan based on those root causes and implement the plan. To exit, after 4 years, the school must be above the lowest performing 15% of Title I schools. And again, like state school turnaround, if a school does not exit, that decision goes before the state board to make a decision on what actions will be required moving forward. The last category of CSI, Comprehensive Support and Improvement, is for graduation rate. This designation is any public high school, and that's very specific in the statute. All public high schools. Any public high school with a graduation rate equal to or less than 67% for 3 years on average. Again, these resources are the Title I school improvement funds taken off the top of the Title I state allocation, and the actions are very similar. They're the same as the CSI Title I schools. USB will contract a third-party provider to conduct a needs assessment, root cause analysis. The LEU will decide how and with whom they want to develop that plan based on those results and implement the plan. To exit, the school must have a graduation rate above 67% for years 3 and 4 of the 4-year designation. And again, if a school does not exit this category, it goes before the state board to make a decision on what actions the school will implement moving forward. And let me turn the time over to Leslie.
So I will talk about the other federal designation called Targeted Support and Improvement. The ESSA school improvement designation called Targeted Support and Improvement, or TSI, is the designation for a school that has at least one student group below the lowest 5% of all schools for 2 consecutive years. The data is taken from the accountability system, and all schools are placed into a rank order list, and a 5% cut is made there. The student groups that will be analyzed individually for each school are the economically disadvantaged student group, students with disabilities, English learners, and the major racial and ethnic groups. In this category, the LEA, or the local education agency, the district or charter school, runs this whole process. The LEA notifies the schools. We have notified in a letter, as Max said, the LEA, but now it is the LEA's position to notify the schools, to conduct a comprehensive needs assessment and root cause analysis, to develop a plan, and to implement that plan using local resources. These schools will exit within 4 years if they have 2 consecutive years where the student groups identified are above the lowest 5% of all schools. If the schools fail to exit and they're a Title I school, the Title I school status will raise to a CSI status, focusing on those student groups that were identified. In the prior designations that Max talked about for CSI and also for state turnaround, each of the failure to exit categories on those slides indicated that the state board would take action if the schools did not exit. This slide lays out some of the actions that are listed in the rule, R277.
-920,
Thank you.
specifically Section 8.
That delineates the actions that the board could take for both a district school or a charter school. This graphic attempts to clarify the TSI identification process. When we sent out the letter to all LEAs, to all superintendents and charter school directors, the letter included a link to a spreadsheet that identifies 330 schools in Utah who meet the identification criteria for targeted support and improvement. It's somewhat of a complex process, so we laid out this visual in that, just like normal, all schools and LEAs data from SAGE or RISE are put into the accountability system. From that, a rank order list is published and a cut score is established at the 5% mark. Then, once that cut score is established for all schools, each student group in each Utah school is run through the state accountability system individually. The question then becomes, does that school have student groups performing at or below the scores associated with that lowest 5% cut established at the beginning? And if so, they're identified for targeted support and improvement. This link will take you to the spreadsheet that was linked in the letter identifying the targeted support and improvement list of schools in the state of Utah. I've snipped a few pictures here to show that the current year 5% cut score is that the student group must have had above 34.93% of the points available in the accountability system for that group. Please note that this spreadsheet has 2 tabs. The first tab is titled TSI Schools 2018. It's simply a list of schools in all LEAs and the number of student groups identified for being in that lowest 5%. The second tab, which I have highlighted, is titled TSI Student Group Scores 2018. That tab will take each school individually and display the scores earned in the accountability system for that student group. This will be a good place to find some of the data that was used to calculate TSI. Now that you've been identified as a TSI school, there are some requirements and processes. However, they are all led by the LEA. So again, the local education agency, the district, or charter school leadership must notify the school of their TSI status. Then the schools partner with stakeholders and establish a targeted support and improvement plan for each identified student group. So if my school is identified for students with disabilities and English language learners, then I would need to come up with a plan or actions for each student group. The plans must include interventions that meet ESSA's evidence-based requirements. There's a 4-tier guidance document available, and many include a review of LEA and school-level budgeting to identify resource inequities. The intent of this identification is for schools to really pay attention to the student groups for which there is a gap between the student population and this student group, and to really focus on closing that gap. The TSI plans must be approved by the LEA, meaning the local school board or governing board of the charter school, prior to being implemented. And the LEA must monitor the implementation of those plans. Again, the State Board of Education will not be reviewing plans or monitoring implementation. In the letter that was sent to superintendents and charter school leaders, there was a key to the codes for the student groups. This resource is a resource that is used by all schools identified in state school turnaround and comprehensive support and improvement, those earlier identifications we talked about. And while TSI school teams do not need to use this handbook, it may be a good resource to look over an improvement plan template, some interviews, surveys, different data analysis tools, and root cause analysis tools. The link is to a PDF copy of that handbook on our website. TSI schools were identified this year. It is the responsibility this year for LEAs to notify schools and to create a plan including actions for each student group identified. Also to begin implementing the plan for the next 3 years, and then exit criteria will be calculated. This is a brief overview of these different types of school improvement programs, and we understand there may still be many questions. Here are our contact information for the school improvement team, for myself, Leslie Evans, for Max Lang, my colleague you heard from earlier, and Dr. Donaldson, who is our coordinator for the department. Please do not hesitate to reach out to us should you have more questions on these new school improvement initiatives. Thank you.